Hello everyone, I'm Hannah, I'm from AnswerThePublic. This is our second webinar, so we did the first one last month and we're back again for round two. Yeah, that one was great, we had loads of people on it, so we're doing these every month now going forward. So thank you for being here. As we sort of mentioned, we've got absolutely thousands of you from all over the world who've signed up to this month's webinar, so it is great for you all to be here. So a very quick reminder of what the webinar series is all about. So every month we're talking to industry experts from SEO to creative, from PR to paid search, about how you can use search data to read people's minds and make better business decisions as a result. So it's going to be a very kind of relaxed conversation with our guests each month, but we will give you kind of visual examples and key takeaways on how to get even more from your search insight. So today we've got two guests with us. So we've got Sophie back again. Sophie is from Search Listening. She's back by popular demand. Sophie was last month's guest. But we're also talking today to PR expert Stella Bales. So this is Stella's first time on the webinar. So yeah, we're going to be talking about how search insight can help you truly relate to the public. Just a quick note, so in the overview of the session today, we did say that we would be talking about how to use search listening for other things as well, like brand reputation and influencer discovery. But what we realised in kind of the planning of this session is that those two are such big topics that they actually deserve a webinar in their own right. So we'll be doing those webinars in the future. The first one will be next month, where we'll specifically kind of focus on brand reputation in its own right. So yeah, definitely come to that one. It'll be a really good webinar. So Stella and Sophie, before we get started, perhaps you guys could give a little intro about you and your background and why you're here today. So Stella, do you want to do that first?
Sure, yeah. Hi, everyone. So as Hannah said, I am from Coverage Book. Coverage Book is a PR reporting tool. We basically pull together all of your reports really quickly, that big time-consuming bit. So go and check us out if you want to. But I also host the PR Resolution podcast. Also check that out. I'm doing lots of plugs, aren't I? I'll try not to do that now. But with my positions with the podcast and with Coverage Book, I'm in a really fortunate place where I can be in touch with all sorts of different types of PR teams, whether in-house, agency, and in loads of different countries as well. So really get to hear about what's going on in the industry and also where the challenges are. But previous to working in technology, I did work agency side. So I was at traditional PR agencies for many years, and then went into a digital marketing agency where we were some of the first people, I can't claim that we were the first, maybe we were, to put public relations merged with search engine optimization together as a strategy. And the reason why that was quite good at that time, it was around sort of 2009 that we were doing that. PR was finding it a real challenge to be able to prove the value of their work. And with this sort of new strategy of search and PR together, we were able to often get to a real big sort of increase in revenue for a lot of our clients. So we did pretty well. And actually, just to sort of reveal, the three of us have all worked together and in that agency. So we won all sorts of awards, and it was really, really brilliant. And we were able to grow our agency through that sort of unique work. But none of those strategies were possible without search insight, and it really built the online PR strategies. And Sophie was our insight queen at that time.
So Insight Queen Sophie, can you give us a bit of an intro about you as well?
Oh, it's very nice to be called an Insight Queen. Yes, so if you didn't catch me last week, I'm Sophie. I am here from Search Listening today. I suppose really now I split my role half and half, so I'm still working in the agency that Stella's just referenced. In the agency, my job title is audience planning director, and that means that for our clients, I spend basically all my time really trying to get to grips with how their customers or potential customers behave online, and how what we can learn about them really, and how we can best sort of speak to them. And then I suppose in doing that, I've been working in digital for over 10 years now, but I originally trained as a journalist. So my kind of thread that's always held true for me is just a a real fascination, curiosity, nosiness about how people behave. And actually, in working in planning in a digital marketing agency over the years, I've made more and more use of search data and really kind of come to value it as an amazing source of just understanding people, really. I think sort of, you know, I say for myself, but think about the way that you search and the things that you might tell Google. It's really a treasure trove for understanding audiences. But I think all too often Search Insight lives in a sort of SEO box, a real sort of techie world. So now I spend half my time focusing on search listening, trying to help educate people as to how they can do it themselves and to really sort of grow it, and to get it out of that SEO box and get more people like PRs, but other marketers using Search Insight.
Lovely. All right, that's great. Thank you, guys. So just a little bit of info about kind of house rules and stuff like that. So please do ask questions. We have got time for questions at the end, so send them through. I'll be looking at those as the session goes along. If there's anything that is kind of relevant to a point that Stella and Sophie is making, we'll try and get them to answer that at the time. But yeah, there will be time for that also at the end. And do share on Twitter as well. So we've got a hashtag for today. So the hashtag is #SearchListeningForPR. And that's in the corner of each slide. So if you haven't had time to write that down, don't worry. You'll see it throughout the presentation. You can also tag us. We are at AnswerThePublic, and Stella is at Coverage Book, and Sophie is at Search Listening. And we've got a few slides as well with those Twitter handles on, should you need them later on. So let's get on to questions. So to kick things off, and I think this one's probably for Stella. So why should PR and communications experts be thinking about Search Insight? I guess kind of even more so right now with everything that's kind of going on in the world. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I guess before we dive into Search Insight specifically, I just want to stop on Insight. So there's a few different points with communications and building our strategies and just generally with marketing that we will be looking at Insight that everybody on this webinar will be familiar with. So starting at the right end of this diagram, I could probably guarantee nearly everybody on this call will be familiar with creating surveys for story angles. So whether that is sort of small pools of market research to try and get some news coverage out there, or if it's sort of going into different social insights and putting that into story angles, it really, really does help. So that's always a great place. Then sort of the level behind that is when we are coming up with our content plans or our media insight or our influencer insight. So really sort of building the campaigns before we get to the point of sending in. There's all sorts of insight points there. Often it is around media, journalists, and then also social insights as well. And really, really important, definitely a important place. And you can see before that, you have your communication strategy, and the only ones that will sort of come in from maybe a more senior position and senior groups will be any customer data that might be fed through. But generally, in the PR creation of strategies and content and sell-ins, it will be sort of sat around this sort of social insights and surveys that we're most used to with Insight. Now, with those two, they absolutely have their place, but they also have some limitations. So you can see this image on the screen right here. And I know that most people are guilty of this. I'm definitely guilty of this, of projecting a certain image on social. So, you know, this is a funny image here with like the one on the left of the girl with, you know, I imagine her caption might be "First days of summer," something like that. And then on the right, am I going to get poisoned by this daisy? And I think that the point we're trying to make here is if you're taking your insight from social, yes, your target audience will be on those different social channels, and those conversations you will find nuggets of insight that are going to be really, really important for your strategy, but we just need to be aware that it might not be the true picture of what's going on. Equally with the other kind of research that I mentioned, that with surveys for story angles, it is a really small pool. It's often sort of 1,000 to sometimes I've seen 10,000, but it's not generally like the whole world. But yeah, definitely with the social insight, as we're going to talk about, we're going to come back to it, and Sophie's going to talk about how it can be sort of coupled up with search insight. But definitely do need to remember that, you know, if people do live their best life on Insta, I think probably they're living their real life on Google. You know, going back to that girl, she's probably searching whether she's going to get poisoned by that flower she's just put in her mouth or something worse. I know I definitely would be. So thinking about sort of the girl and we've got this image of the boy and what people are actually putting into Google. So I just want everyone to just think about the last time they searched for something. Like, when was the last time did you pull your phone out and quickly search for something? It's you're doing it more often than you actually realize. You know, often when we're thinking about sort of PR and insights and our planning phase, it seems very organized and we're just going to look at search insight here. Actually, we're all doing it all day long. So just looking at this image here, this boy is being influenced by the news. So he might well be searching for what he's seeing on the news there. In the top left, there's a hashtag that he heard about on the radio earlier on. There will be haters. And he's like, what is that hashtag? I need to have a look at that. And he's going to search for it. Equally, he's a young guy and he's got his prom coming up and he wants to know how to kiss a girl. He ain't going to be putting that on to Instagram. So we do put a lot of truths into Google without even realizing, and all of that is going in there. So there is that sort of level of insight behind the Google search page that is all just building, and it is building. So it's not just about sort of the quality of this data. There is it is big data as well. So you can see here 3.5 billion Google searches a day. That's insane when we think about some of the other ways that we research to put into our strategies, into our planning phases. I mean, our all target audience is definitely in there. So you are in this sort of unique position with Search Insight that you do have quality, but you do have quantity as well. So it's a real sort of special mix. And it's that sort of special mix that does really get sort of the ear of your clients and your stakeholders at a more senior level than you do with other types of research. And, you know, it can really help with quick story angles, but also it's really getting into that deeper understanding of our target audience. So we've got our industry term here, public relations. And I just wanted to sort of pause on this for a minute. You probably would have seen, if you've been in the industry as long as I've been around in PR for a very, very, very long time, I don't know, 17 years, something like that. And I have heard over that time, different debates about what our industry should be called. I think a few years ago, there was, I think it was Ogilvy sort of put out that we should be changing our name to Earned Influence. And yep, it's absolutely valid. But I think where we are right now, I think public relations couldn't be a better description of what we are trying to do, because the public are more savvy than they ever have been. I say we are them. And yeah, we don't want any bullshit anymore. Sorry, I don't know if I'm allowed to say that. Just did. But yeah, we unfortunately as an industry, we were burnt a little bit from like fake news and Cambridge Analytica going out and sort of being big public knowledge. And it wasn't everyone's fault, but people have their guard up about news and whether they're getting facts and where those facts are coming from. And apart from that, they want to be related to and they want to be understood, and they want that, especially right now. There needs to be some empathy. So the quote that you can see on the screen right now, that's Rick. Rick is head of editorial at 72 Point Inc. For anyone who doesn't know 72 Point, they are associated to a newswire that feeds news to all of the major news publications in the UK and the US. So he's totally in touch with what kind of news is going out right now. And we did a webinar last week, actually, which was all about navigating news desks during a pandemic, which we're in right now, which is something that we've never sort of experienced before, this kind of news agenda. And the biggest piece of advice, which is coming straight from the editors and from the journalists, is be empathetic, be understanding, and be relevant. And yes, and where possible, have data to back up this sort of relevance and to prove that you are understanding to what people are going through right now. So with this kind of search research that we are going to be going through in a lot more detail today, you do, as I said, you do get that sort of great mix of deeper level understanding of your audience, but you've got a great big volume of it. And what that can do is not just really feed your PR strategies, it can actually transform organizations, whether that be revenue or whether it be other types of objectives. And that's what makes it really powerful. But we're going to show you some examples later on.
Okay, that's great, thank you. So I guess the next question is then, why Google for Insights? What is it that Google can give you that other research methods can't? And perhaps, Sophie, that's one that you could talk through.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, Stella's touched on some of it, but for me, Google, I guess, is sort of the ultimate source of insight. The sample size is huge. So Stella's already talked about it, but 3.5 billion searches a day. It's just ginormous, and also really, really representative. So again, going back to social listening, you think of some of the social networks, there's a definite bias towards certain demographics in terms of who's using some of them. So if you're using those as your source of insight, you need to be sure that the people you're trying to talk to are actually on those networks and that you're taking insights relevant to them. The great thing with Google is that we know, certainly in the UK and the US, where it's the by far sort of the leading search engine in the market, over sort of 95% of the online population is using Google on a crazily frequent basis, and it's everyone from your grandparents through to your children and everyone in between. So in terms of trying to get a coverage of understanding people, you don't see the same sort of biases that you see elsewhere. It's an observed method as well, which obviously, if you're thinking about research methods, social listening and search listening both work on that level. For me, the thing here is that, yes, surveys and focus groups and panels and those sorts of things are great. They have a place. I'm not saying anything else should be disregarded, but clearly when you put people in a focus group or you send them survey questions, you're asking them to recall certain information. There's a certain sort of bias to how people might act in terms of they might not want to give certain things away in a survey. They might not be truthful if you're asking them about really personal things like their finances or their health or their relationships. And so just observing how people are behaving, which is what search listening allows you to do, is a real bonus. Again, we're going to come onto this a little bit more, and Stella's sort of flower example that I really liked just now is a really good example of this. But people are real on Google because they are searching because they need to know something. And it's anonymized, so it's not like we're really sort of invading on anyone's privacy, but it means that we're able to understand their real needs and their real thoughts and their real feelings. Because people don't just search when they're trying to buy something, they search when they want to know something. And I often see people just putting statements into Google. I think it's people trying to find sort of communities of people like them that share their beliefs, but there's a whole spectrum of behaviors that we see. You can access the data for free, which is always a great thing, particularly in a time, I suppose, when budgets are being crunched all over the place. But being able to access this data for free is brilliant. You can access it in real time. I hope you won't. I hope you'll stay with us, but you could literally sort of open up a window on your computer now and start mining some of this insight, like right where you are. And it reflects truths and trends and topicality. And for me, that's really, really important. So the truths thing, I quite often say a line, we all tell Google things that we don't tell the most important people in our lives. So our partners, our doctors, our best friends. I do it, and everyone I've said it to, it resonates with. But the trending and the topicality thing is really, really interesting as well. So in terms of a freshness of data, Google is always updating, certainly those suggestions that it feeds back to you when you start searching. And that's one of the real important data sources that I'm going to be talking to you about today. So I've been tracking just should I as kind of a seed term. So what gets suggested when you start typing should I in a Google search box in the UK since before lockdown, just sort of when the pandemic was becoming big news over here. And you've seen all of those should I suggestions change in tune with when the financial markets all crashed, when oil became sort of negative in terms of value, when lockdown started and people weren't sure whether they should go to work or not. You see searches like should I buy stocks? Should I be buying oil now? Should I sell my house? And now it's things like should I wear a mask? Should I shave my head is another one that I'm really, really enjoying. Should I wash my washing? So you see those all get updated in real time because Google is always surfacing what it sees other people searching.
Okay, great. So I think you've touched on this a little bit already, but it'd be great if you could go into a little bit more detail about the difference between social listening and search listening.
Yeah, sure. So I often talk about social listening while I'm talking about search listening, which might sound counterintuitive, but a couple of reasons. And one, I suppose, is that for me, it feels like if you are someone who is comfortable and familiar with doing social listening, then you should feel the same about doing search listening. It's exactly the same practice. So taking insights from online data, but you're taking it from search data instead of social data. I find it really interesting, and I suppose it's a bit of the mission that I'm on to change this, that search listening is not so social listening is obviously a huge industry. There are a ton of tools that you can use. There's businesses that sort of sole offering is to do social listening for you. There are people whose job, it's their entire job doing social listening, and that's great because it is a great source of insight, but I would love to see the same with search. And if you go back to like the outputs and the sorts of insights that you can get, again, a bit like Stella's sort of flower girl earlier, this for me is a nice example. So again, if you were on the webinar last month, you'll have seen this, but cat owners looking at hashtag mycat in Instagram, lots of cute kittens, and then you look at search and it's exactly the same seed term that we've used, so it's my cat, but it's my cat's from hell, my cat stares at me, keeps sneezing. So a lot more interesting sort of problematic stuff that's going on, attitudinal behavioural stuff there for you to explore. Same for new parents, so this is hashtag newborn baby on Instagram, lovely cute kids just been born, very, very nice. But then in search in Google, you're seeing my newborn baby is constipated, is wheezing, is congested, is sick. And for me, this is one of, I think, probably the starkest differences, if you like, because if you're going back to what Stella said, social is perhaps where you project, and I will concede that I think we all got to a point where everyone was projecting so much on social that actually there's a bit of backlash and people are a bit more truthful now on social media. But overwhelmingly, social is where you'll see the lovely sort of fuzzy, heartwarming pictures, and then actually Google is where the parent who's potentially up at 2 o'clock in the morning because their baby won't stop crying and they don't know what to do, they're turning to Google. They're not going on Instagram at that point. So if you're a brand who's trying to help new parents, not newborn parents, then actually Google is somewhere you should be taking insight from. And it extends again through to finance. So this is on Twitter. So Twitter rather than Instagram. For me, Twitter, there's really interesting behaviours on there. I think a tendency, like, sharing memes and having a bit of banter or just having a bit of a laugh about serious matters is a thing on Twitter. This is a guy that I sort of plucked off Twitter, found his tweet, and he's a grand into his overdraft, and he's depositing £100 on a betting website, and he's making a joke about how his bank will feel when they see that. So I found his tweet looking at my overdraft as a search term in Twitter. If you look at that in Google, you start to see, why would a bank cancel my overdraft? How soon can I use? And then how can I get out of? So again, if you're a financial institution trying to help people and really trying to understand, I think in social media, you're going to find people potentially bluffing. I think there's a pool of influencers, and there's some people who might be more honest about their finances on social media, but largely the really rich stuff where you're able to help people and have a really good, honest conversation with them is going to come from search, because people can be more honest with Google than they can on social.
Okay, that's great. And we've got lots of questions coming through about this. So we're just going to answer for all those people that are asking actually about how you do this practically. So yeah, I'm sure a lot of people are thinking, do I need an analytics expert to kind of help me crunch all of this Google data? Or is it something that I can do for myself? So yeah, and also, like, if so, how do I go about doing that?
I wouldn't mind just sort of jumping in quickly on this first, just
cool.
what's going on in the industry. So we've actually seen quite a big change in the last, probably only a couple of years, in new skills being brought into public relations that have education from analytics, from data backgrounds, and actually sort of in some of the bigger agencies creating whole departments and whole teams. So for example, Ketchum in New York, their global insight and analytics team is based there. Shout out to you guys. I think you might be on the call actually. And yeah, they've put that investment into that kind of skill set. And I know that Nicole there is from an analytics background. Her education was data and analytics. Can't remember exactly what, sorry, Nicole. But she's somebody to come into public relations and learn public relations with that analytical background. So that is starting to happen. That's new. That wasn't happening when I was in PR years ago. Having said that, also shout out somebody, Laura Joint, for example, who I work with, who does all of her insight and all of her search data insight herself in order to write content for the PR resolution blog. So, you've got two scales there of somebody working alone, kind of alone, I work for two, but also then a whole department feeding in insight to clients and to catch them around the world. So it is changing, but I think, sorry to jump in, but I think Soph's going to show how there is a scale here. You can sort of go in depth, but there's definitely stuff that you can do. And it's probably worth saying that, I don't know all of your sort of degrees, but I'm definitely not a natural analytical person, but I have been able to do this kind of research, So yes, there's definitely possibilities.
Yeah, and absolutely the same. I said it at the start, but I trained as a journalist originally. I am much more comfortable with words rather than numbers. And actually, so I think if you talk about search data and if you speak to a search person or a traditional search SEO type person, one of the tools that they'll talk to you about is Google's keyword tool in their sort of AdWords planning function. For me, that's a bit too granular and in depth, and I'm very familiar in a search world and I don't like using that tool, but there are actually other tools that you can use that are a lot more simple in terms of their interface and giving you the ability to get to quick, useful insights without having to sort of mine through a ton of irrelevant, complex stuff. So the first one is Google Trends, which you may be familiar with. It's quite well known. So Google Trends, it's trends.google.co.uk because I'm in the UK, but .com or whatever the equivalent is where you are in the world. And it allows you to put in a search topic here. So the one I like to put in, we're all talking about it, it's just coronavirus. And then I'm not going to play with it too much, but you have a play yourself when you get a moment. You can toggle around all these sorts of things. So you can look at searches in different countries around, various time periods. You can get quite granular and quite custom with that. Google categorizes searches, so you could look at searches in a certain industry, like health and beauty versus automotive or something like that. And then you can look at web searches or image searches or shopping searches, so you can determine what type of behavior, I suppose, you're trying to understand. So what you get out of this is a graph that looks like this. What I should say is, if you're not familiar with it, it's not giving you search volumes. It's not telling you that 100 people searched for coronavirus between the 15th and 21st of March, but it's indexing search interest. So what it means is that the peak, i.e. 100% of the search interest, was during this week, the 15th to the 21st of March in the UK, and actually on the 8th to the 14th, interest was at 75%, so 25% less than it was at peak. So it gives you a kind of quantified view of what's going on. The comparison part of that is quite nice because you can start, so terms that I like to put in here just to educate people around things is things like weather. So weather is something that people will always search for. Similarly, news, and I am going to go there and put porn in there because it is something people search for, believe it or not. What you can see here is really interesting. So like porn holds true, which for me is sort of hilarious and fascinating. There is if UK lockdown started here, and it doesn't look to have influenced behaviour around searching for porn at all, which is quite interesting. I know, was it Pornhub went out at the beginning of lockdown? I think they did it in Italy and the UK with sort of opening up access because they thought people were going to be bored at home with nothing to do. But hey, the behaviour doesn't seem to look like that was what happened. And you can see obviously a spike in need for news searches, which is the yellow bar from here. Interesting, weather went down when people started staying indoors because clearly if we were in lockdown, we weren't able to go out and enjoy the wonderful outdoors. Therefore, weather became a bit of an irrelevance in our life. But actually, coronavirus from the 16th of February really, really took off. It gives us a sense of timings around when search interest got really, really interesting. And for me, the fact that it's overtaken porn, it's overtaken news, it's overtaken weather is just super, super significant in terms of interest in something which, come on, like it's a pandemic and it's affecting us all massively. So perhaps not surprising, but interesting to see it quantified. If I just remove some of these terms and let's stay focused on coronavirus. The other interesting thing that you get down here, this, by the way, will differ again depending on where you are. And just remember always that the number is the indexed interest. So the most interest has come from England and Wales is 2% less. But this box down here gets really, really interesting as well. So if we were looking at coronavirus as a broad topic in terms of what I put into Google Trends, this box down here starts to break it out a little bit deeper and tell me actually what are the niche things that people are interested in within that. Breakout just means that it's I think it's up about like 3,500 versus the last time period that you're looking at, and the time period will be dictated by what you've got up here. So we can see, you know, that makes sense because no one was searching coronavirus news last year because it wasn't a thing. So you can either look at rising or top searches down here, but this is just really nice and useful, and you can scroll through and see tons more tied to whatever topic you put in terms of drilling down into like what is it that people are specifically interested in. So we can see news, cases, you know, that sort of thing. Perhaps not interesting, but it gives you a sort of a further level of understanding, if you like. And then the other source that I always tap into is Google's suggestions. So when I say that, I literally mean when you start typing something in this bar here, what Google suggests, and it's predicting stuff based on what it's seen other people search. A cool feature that we actually spotted this week that I've not seen before is that actually if you open up a Google window, and I should say again, if you're using Chrome, actually go to Google, because I know Chrome has a tendency to try and default to predicting your searches up here, like it's trying to get that step ahead of you. But go into an actual visit Google in your Chrome window. If you just click here now, it already tells you what are trending searches in the UK. So if you're literally just trying to look at like what is really, really popular in search right now, I can see that by just literally clicking into that bar. So that's a really, really great source of insight. But if I was trying to look for something a bit more specifically myself, I might, again, if we go coronavirus space, we can suddenly see all these different suggestions that people are having. I should say here as well, also remember to go into an incognito window and sign out, because otherwise your suggestions will be sort of biased and affected by what it is you've been searching for. So if you remove all of that personalization, you will just get sort of pure suggestions in terms of what it is that people in your country are searching for.
Thanks and for answering that, Sophie, because you've just actually preempted a question that somebody had about how you kind of don't get those personal results. So
yeah. So incognito and sign out, make sure you're out. If you start seeing them, I think it's in purple and you get a little X here, that means you'll know that you're getting some level of personalization, because you can get rid of the ones that you've got before. So just open up a new window. So with this, you can start playing around. You might say like coronavirus A, like, oh, so the top suggestion there is Africa. So the top suggestion just means it's the most popular thing right now. And you can keep doing that. The thing I really like to do with wildcards, as I call them as well here, is like, so if I put in something like why do hate, doesn't quite make sense, but if I go back and put a space in between do and hate, what you'll see Google doing is trying to predict what comes here, but also what completes the sentence. So I get why do I hate myself? So a very sort of random thing for people to be searching, but people are doing it to the extent that Google is suggesting it. And then why do cats hate water? Why do I hate my life? So some really deep stuff here in terms of the sorts of things that people will tell Google. So that's quite interesting if you want to start at a really broad place and like you've got some curiosities about what some blank parts of a sentence might be. That's a really good thing to do. And then obviously Answer the Public, I suppose, is the evolution of this, because what we're doing here is putting things into Google and seeing what those suggestions are that come up. But obviously Answer the Public, if you're not familiar with it, have a play. But effectively it's that en masse. So it shortcuts you having to go and put something into Google suggestions and then type the whole alphabet out and capture all of those suggestions that come back. So I've got coronavirus there, let's do it. If we search for that, you will see it takes a couple of minutes. Here we are. And then all of a sudden, so it's effectively gone into Google and done where coronavirus, who coronavirus, why coronavirus, and all of those questions, plus all of these. So coronavirus is, coronavirus near, etc., and the same with different comparison terms, and then the whole of the alphabet as well. So there's an absolute ton of insight for you to start looking through here. We often get asked about how you prioritize in this. It's probably just worth pointing out that these gradient dots, the darker the green, the more popular that search term is. So basically the higher up it comes in Google suggestions. So yeah, I mean, those are three tools. Answer the Public has a paid for version, which I'll show you a feature of later on, because there's definite value in using it, but you can use it for free. You can use Google suggestions for free, and you can use Google Trends for free, and they are relatively sort of consumer facing platforms rather than anything super complex and technical. I would just sort of implore you to spend some time digging around with them and getting used to the sorts of insights that you can take from them.
Okay, that's great. Just to let you know on timing, so this is going to be our last question, and then we'll go on to questions from the floor. We've had loads through already, really good ones as well. So yeah, I guess the last question really is kind of bringing it to life. So have you got any examples of how all of this can be used in PR? Perhaps Stella, you can start with some thoughts on that one.
Yeah, so we thought, me and Sophie had a quick chat about this, and we thought it'd be good to just bring it back to sort of that examples of when we use insight in PR, and just to try and bring it to life of how you can use search insight, and starting with story angles, especially with the current news agenda really changing and the fact that we need to be relevant, how you can use this kind of data to quickly change a story angle. So even if you might have your sort of campaign worked out, you can sort of add to it or change it. So do you want to show an example of how you can do that?
So looking at like search questions is really important for what you're talking about for me. Journalists are doing it loads, so I guess, you know, it would make sense that PRs should start doing it more as well. I've actually got an example here that's kind of pre-coronavirus times, if you like, but I think it's a really nice execution of it. So this is on the Sky Sports website in the UK. It's actually taken from Soccer AM, which is like a magazine lifestyle football show that goes out every Saturday in normal times. And they do this really fun feature called the Soccer AM Autocomplete Challenge. And I'm not going to play the video now, but I'll get Hannah, if we can include the link in the email that we send out after this, just so that you can all have a look at it yourself. That would be great.
Yeah, no problem.
So what they do here, so Jurgen Klopp is the manager of Liverpool Football Club here in the UK, and all they've done is gone into Google Suggest, like I just did, and they've pulled out the top questions about him and actually put them to him, and it's really light-hearted and fun. Is Jurgen Klopp angry? You can see as one of the questions, and who would play him in a film and that sort of thing. But, you know, it's actually really nice because it's the journalist effectively sort of giving the journalistic tools to the public. You know, they're asking those questions that people are asking Google, and they're getting Jurgen to actually answer the questions himself. So that's just a light-hearted, fun way of doing it. But I've seen other people, I think The Guardian, again in the UK, have often taken like the top search for question in an area and then got an expert in to actually answer it to give some real credibility. So journalists are doing it, and I'm sure they'd love to be getting that information from PRs too.
Yeah, especially with that tool that you that you mentioned became live and available this week. That's just literally the most popular searches right now. It's great to be able to use that and make it topical. Cool. Okay, so taking a step back from actually selling in and using those angles, obviously there is an element of putting campaigns together, creating content and storytelling in PR as well. So how can we use search insight in that part of the role?
Yeah, so planning content, I guess most people who are planning content, I would imagine, are doing it on some sort of cycle. You know, it's not a one-off job that you plan your content and tick, you're done. What I want to show everyone here is actually just one of the new features of AnswerThePublic Pro. This is actually what you'll see if you're a pro user and you log in. You'll see a slightly different sort of homepage where you still get your search bar up here, but down here you'll see your searches. So you can see all the different searches that you've carried out. And what it invites you to do is to run a new snapshot. So I can see that the last time I looked at Virgin Atlantic was April the 23rd, but now I want to run it again. So this is really, so for me, if you're creating content on a regular basis, whether it's as part of a campaign or just an ongoing sort of retained project, I think you should be checking this, I mean, weekly, if not certainly monthly. And the tool makes it really easy now that you can just go in, see the search and click, give me a new snapshot. So what that's done is run my Virgin Atlantic search again today. But the really cool bit now is that obviously we can go into compare data here, and I can see that was the last time I ran it. That's the time I've run it today. I can, if I'd run it more frequently, then the other searches would be appearing here as well. And then I can just click compare, and what I will get now, without having to really dig through all the details of the data and work out what's different, I can see, actually, look, Virgin Atlantic, there's people curious, are they still flying to Florida? Which terminal for Orlando? Why were they successful? Will they survive? Obviously tied to coronavirus and everything that's going on there. So it gives you that kind of snapshot of what's new and what you need to be doing right now. And for me, I think that's one of the real valuable parts of search data is if you're collecting it on a regular basis, you can start to see some really, really interesting stories of it. Something else I just want to show here is something we've worked on at Search Listening. So we use Google Trends, which is why we've got the index of 0 to 100 again, to look at all the kind of moments from lockdown that have really brought the country together. So I'll just replay that for you. But all this is doing is showing how interest in these different things has evolved over time. So Joe Wicks is a UK fitness influencer who's been doing PE lessons on a daily basis. There was a call for volunteers for the NHS. People have been putting rainbows in their windows so that when people are out and about, I think it's a bit of a boost for the NHS workers to see them, which is lovely. There's been various things that have happened. And we've just used, we got lots of questions last time I showed something like this. So this is a tool called Flourish, and you just plot the data in, and then it kind of creates this racing line chart for you, which is really, really effective. So I guess my point here is collect the data on an ongoing basis, because search data played out over time can tell some really, really nice stories. And you can do that retrospectively in Google Trends, or you can be doing it yourself in Answer the Public as well.
What a lovely way to get your story across in content. I've been gold dust when I was a PR, makes me want to go back. So looking at, and actually, I just wanted to go back to the feature that you just showed us with Answer the Public. I'm sure quite a few people who are watching this were thinking, brand reputation. It's like the perfect way to be able to track it. I hope people are thinking, I was just sat there like, wow, that would be so.
For sure, and that is something that we will be going into more detail about on next month's webinar, so make sure everyone that's interested in that comes back for that one.
I will be. So yeah, communication strategy. So I know that we're going backwards here, but so before you set out your content and you are thinking about what kind of comms plans you want to be putting together for the year ahead, or for a brand or organization, there might be an objective set by whether it's marketing or by the organization, and then it gets to, right, now do the comms. But sometimes the search insight can sort of go against that a little bit. If you go to the next slide.
Sorry.
Okay. So this is actually a real example. I'm just going to sort of talk around it. So Marks and Spencer's is a major retailer in the UK and Europe, and it's an old client of mine. I think the other guys, you guys worked on it too at different times. So yeah, we know that the PR team there had an objective to be sort of a voice in fashion one of the years that we were working with them. Now, alongside PR, we were doing our own kind of research, our search insight, and so we wanted to sort of see how that coupled up with how the audience felt, and it kind of jarred a little bit. Now, there's no problem with having an objective to try and move a brand into a new space and to have a new kind of reputation. That's actually fun. Obviously, that is a huge role of PR. But you can't sort of leave behind how your audience feels about you. And so, you know, we've got a Google Suggest example here. We did do quite a lot of in-depth search research around this kind of topic. But just as a quick, let's go into Google Suggest, Marks and Spencer's. I just put the letter J, just quickly chose that. And you've got Marks and Spencer's jeans, jumpers, jeggings. I think jeggings is the same in the US as it is in the UK. Yeah, they're not. They won't sort of spring to mind as being like fashion forward. And there are different, but you know, M&S is absolutely loved as a brand, but it's not sort of seen as sort of that voice of fashion. So we fed that back to the marketing team, and it didn't mean to say that it didn't go down that route of voice of fashion, but they just slightly adapted it a little bit, so they weren't making their audience feel alienated or leaving them behind, because you know they're the ones spending money, and so it's just sort of setting up a slightly different angle to communications and having sort of two lines that were sort of going after this new audience, but also making sure that we're making our current customers who are actually spending on the site feeling comfortable too. So the good thing about that was that we were able to create campaigns that worked, but also it meant that we weren't just being given a brief at this stage. We were able to take our insight up a level, and we're going to the bigger marketing meetings, which was getting a seat at the table, which we hadn't had before. So on that, which is why we're going backwards along this line, you see the bad logic now. Was that, so the more that you can pull these insights together, and they are powerful insights of that deeper level understanding of your audience, but also is backed up by volume, you are going to start to get the ear of the C-suite, of more senior people when it matters, because you are providing information that can really make a change. So we're just going to show an example. So if you've got an example of this, and where it sort of can actually, this kind of insight can affect more than just PR and marketing.
Yeah, so what I'm going to show is one of my favourite ever, I guess, campaigns that I think used search listening way sort of before anyone else was thinking in that way. And you may be familiar with it. It was back in 2013, but Ogilvy, I think in Dubai, worked with the UN Women charity, and they launched this campaign all around what women should and shouldn't do. I think it was called Women Shouldn't. But they actually used the Google suggestions as a key part of their creative. So these were ads that went out, but actually they then, I believe they debated it at sort of PR conferences. They took it into classrooms and used it as a opportunity to debate gender equality in the classroom worldwide. And it was absolutely huge. It won loads of awards that year. But I think more importantly, they used a audience insight that came straight from Google suggestions, from search data, to really, really highlight. I think their point was that actually people think gender inequality isn't a thing in 2013. We've all caught up, but actually you just have to look in Google suggestions to see that it isn't that. So the Google suggestions became the central kind of lead part of marketing activity around that, and then they built a whole suite of activity around it that did phenomenally well. And I think it's just because it resonates so well and truly is based on that kind of audience truth.
What kind of coverage did it get?
Oh, well. So Stella did some digging on this for me, let's be honest. So let's just reload that. So just looking in Coverage Book, and I think we just pulled out 4 pieces of coverage that they got, but I believe they got an absolute ton. And you can see some of the numbers around that just based on 4 pieces of coverage. You can dig around online and see the other pieces yourself, but yeah, absolutely smashed it.
Metrics from Coverage Book.
No more plugs.
I know. I've done too many plugs. So that was like sort of great for marketing strategy. We're going to go one level higher because, as I said, it's sometimes a challenge to get that seat at that really senior place in an organisation. So you've got another example of where search insight has actually influenced changes in an organisation and a business, right?
Yeah, so I've not got any slides for this, so I'm just going to talk it through and quickly as well, because I'm sure you guys want to get to questions from us. But so I work with a gym chain in the UK. So they have a huge presence on the high street, lots of gyms, multiple gyms in different cities. And actually we work with them on a marketing basis. But we have, as sort of Stella said, got a seat at the board and got the ear of the board and various other parts of the business interested in the work we're doing because we are using search. So we're now working with their planning team, who are going out and sourcing new locations to open gyms and how to name those gyms, using Search Insight to do that. Because actually, if we can help advise them as to how they name their new gym, so say they're looking to open a new one in London, and actually it's near Victoria Station, but it's also near somewhere else, and actually we can use search to identify that more people talk about that part of London in that way, then the gym is going to just sort of land better and resonate. We're basically speaking the language of the people that we're trying to target in that local area. So bringing Search Insights, I suppose, has given us a greater voice, and it's allowed us to have more input and drive more value across the whole business rather than just sort of staying in our marketing box. And it's working really well. So
I love that. Not just understanding your audience, but actually speaking their language. It just works.
Yeah. Really important.
Cool. Okay. Thank you so much, guys. Loads of really, really useful and interesting information there. We've got an absolute ton of questions, so we're going to try and get through as many of these as we can. We've run over a little bit in terms of the presentation, so we may run over a little bit in terms of questions, but I just want to make sure that we can answer as many. So hopefully you guys can stick around. Okay, so we've got a couple of questions around kind of how up to date the information is that you've been talking through, Sophie. So Is it kind of real-time trending topics, or is there a slight delay in hours? And does Answer the Public give real-time information as well?
So we don't know the answer to that for sure. To get the real 100% answer to that, you'd need to speak to Google, who aren't the most open people about how their algorithms work. But anecdotally, what I've seen is certainly on an hourly basis, Google's suggestions are updated. So what I mean by that is that if, you know, I would imagine, I didn't look at it at the time, but when lockdown happened, you would see questions start almost instantly appearing in those suggestions, because Google ultimately wants to give people searching within it the best experience. It wants to shortcut them getting to the information that they're looking for. So that's why it surfaces those suggestions, because it's like, well, I've seen loads of other people search for that thing, so this person who's starting to search in that way is probably going to search for that thing too. And it needs to be up to date and current and relevant to do that. So I mean, the greatest lag, I would imagine, is like an hourly basis. It's definitely topical and real time. And in terms of Answer the Public literally just pulls in that data. So if it's up to date in Google, it will be up to date in Answer the Public as well. Google Trends can have a bit of a time delay sometimes. I think it's like a day or two behind normally, if you look at it on like a weekly basis. So yeah, bear that in mind.
Okay, great. This is a really interesting question, and I guess particularly relevant to PRs as they're kind of thinking about seeding their campaigns or content further. But someone's asked here, can we use search listening to create ads for Facebook?
Nice.
Yeah, I don't see, absolutely. Like, I think I come back to use search listening how you would use social listening. If you're using social listening to mine insights that feed into your Facebook ad strategy, then do it with search. And you know, whatever the output, whether it's Facebook ads, whether it's a PR campaign, whether it's a content piece, whatever it is always going to resonate better if it's based in insights from real people, which is what search listening is going to help you get to. So yeah, I think that's a great shout. And I would imagine if you're using those sorts of insights that, you know, they should resonate with your audience.
I actually do that. So it's great to hear that kind of question, actually, the fact that, you know, PR isn't just about media relations. We are moving around that pay zone model of paid and owned kind of content. But yeah, I actually do that. We do some ads on social for Coverage Book, and I get so much out of doing this kind of research and knowing that, you know, different parts of PR measurement is important to different types of people. So yeah, absolutely put that into the creative.
Right, okay, so another really interesting question. So someone's asked here, do you have any recommendations or tools that can be used by smaller brands and organisations that might not have as much search data for their brands? What would you say to that?
It's an interesting one. I think the main thing there, and I think anyone would see it, whether you're a smaller brand or not, is I go back to if you go and speak to your search team or some friends who work in search or anyone in search, and you're asking them to do some research for you, they'll probably default to Google's keyword planner. That tool was ultimately built for people who work in paid search, and it's really, really focused on like commercial terms, like so a term that indicates someone's going to buy something. So it might be, you know, shoes or trainers or sneakers or whatever. And then when you start to get to the more interesting niche topics or brands, it will tell you that people aren't searching for them, but it's just because it can't sell you an ad on that, which is why Google suggestions and Google Trends are definitely more powerful around that, because it's not got that I mean, Google is surfacing all the data. It's not just surfacing the data that it thinks will lead to you buying an ad from them. But yeah, I mean, there wouldn't be any other tools. I would say stick using Google Trends and auto suggestions and Answer the Public, but just really think about the terms that you're putting in. It may be that you get a lesser amount of data, but if you're putting in the right terms, like your brand term or things that your audience might search for. So a tip I always like to give people when you're using auto suggestions and Answer the Public is thinking about my. So what is it that relates to your audience and them? So is it like my health or my money or my job or whatever it is? Try putting those sorts of terms in. People might not be searching your brand or the language you speak, but try and anticipate the language they speak and put that in, and then you'll get a load more stuff back.
Okay, great. An interesting, quite specific one here. So someone's asking, how do you know or decide which keywords to use? So this particular person is a weight loss coach and is asking, would I focus on words around weight loss, or maybe words around kind of emotional eating? And also, how many different words or word combinations should you use when you're using these tools on average?
Great question.
That's a really good question. I would say with Google Trends, you probably want to start more broadly. So you might put sort of weight loss into Google Trends and then go down to that sort of box that I showed you at the beginning and look at the related searches for that, because that will start giving you the layer beyond like the kind of key term that you've put in. And actually, I'd say if you're using Answer the Public, a similar approach. So put weight loss in, explore all the wheels that come out, and then from that you'll probably identify some other terms or phrases that people are using, and then you can go back and plug those into Answer the Public, and it kind of becomes this cycle that you go through, like start with one report, find the interesting things, go back and plug them in. And the other tip I would give there is think about how you want to talk about your brand, so, or your product or your service, so weight loss coaching, whatever it is. But then again, I think I said it in the answer to the last question, think about how people think about themselves in relation to your world. So for that one, my weight would be a really great thing to put in there. But also try and play around with the different words. So, you know, some people will say my weight, some people will say my body, you know, like what are all the different ways that people might search? And in terms of quantity, I don't think you can ever do too many. I mean, it comes down to how much time you've got to do your research, really. Start with the obvious ones. If you find anything interesting, start digging those. Always consider how people search, so my or variants of that. But yeah, I don't think you can ever do too much. I can spend hours doing this stuff, but that might be a luxury for some people.
In terms of actual the terms people are using, though, would you suggest that people use, you know, one or two words, or would it be kind of a phrase? Like, how would you do that?
So in Answer the Public, you will always get better results if you try and cap it, I'd say roughly about 3 words. If you're going to put a sentence into Answer the Public, you won't get much back because you're kind of confusing the tool. If you remember, it does that job of shortcutting searches for you. So if you put how to lose weight into Answer the Public, you're effectively asking it to go to Google and look at what's how to lose weight, why how to lose weight, like nonsensical stuff. So lose weight might be another one, as well as weight loss. And then in suggestions, you can play around with slightly longer terms, I would say, especially if you're going to do the wildcard thing and go back and put spaces in sentences. You can be a bit more creative with that. But yeah, Answer the Public, try and cap it to 3 unless there's a really good reason why you'd go beyond that, but certainly don't put sentences in.
Cool. Okay, perfect. So someone's asking about whether you ever use other sources like Reddit or Pinterest to understand search behavior.
I think the methodology holds true for those, absolutely. And any website really that gives you like suggestions, all of those suggestions that they're giving you typically will be based on other user behavior that they've observed. So you could do it in Amazon and like start playing around with the suggestion box in there and seeing what comes back if you were looking for insight around what's particular like interesting commercially in an area that you want to explore. But Reddit, yeah, like anything that's serving up suggestions, you can do this. I wouldn't strictly call it search listening, because I think for me the thing here is mining data from how people are searching and the things they're telling Google. If you come back to like somewhere like Reddit, I appreciate it can be quite anonymous, but you're still tying your comments and your discussions back to a profile, whereas in Google it's really, really anonymous. So absolutely do it. You will get insight from there. I wouldn't quite call it search listening, but I think that's a semantic thing. So do it because you'll get interesting insights. Yeah. Okay,
great. Cool. Okay, one more question. This one came up actually in our last webinar, but a few people are asking, they have B2B clients. So do all these principles kind of match? Do they cross over from sort of more consumer to more B2B clients? Like how would you go about search listening if you're B2B?
Yes, absolutely. I think it does, because, you know, again, think about the searches you perform. You don't only search in consumer mode, you also search when you're in work mode, or certainly I do. I definitely search for things related to the job that I'm doing. So yes, absolutely, it works for B2B. And the tips I would say there is just think about, again, those words that you're using and try and anticipate. I think one of the biggest watch outs if you're trying to use search listening for B2B is to not get hung up on jargon that you might use that's really familiar in your industry. Again, try and start at like audience needs. So I don't like my accountant or like my accounts or something, you know, rather than some sort of service that you sell. Try and anticipate the needs of what your users are going to be and explore search behavior around that. And the only difference between B2C and B2B in that world would be the sort of terms that you're using, I suppose, and the needs that you anticipate.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. that's all of the questions that we've got time for. We just had so many through that we haven't managed to get through them all, but I would encourage you to tweet any of us if there's anything in particular that we didn't cover off today. We've had a lot of people asking about whether there's going to be a recording of the webinar, and there will be. We are recording today's session, so we will be sending you a follow-up email tomorrow where you'll be able to access that. And I would definitely also encourage you to look at our previous webinar as well, which was specifically on search listening and how to go through that process as well, because there's been a lot of questions on the tools, and in the previous webinar we did kind of a deeper dive on that. So definitely check that one out. It's on our YouTube channel, but also I'll put a link again to that in the follow-up email, which will go out tomorrow. But yeah, so that's all we've got time for today. Just a massive thank you to Stella and Sophie. We did actually mention an offer earlier and a freebie. So guys, do you want to talk about those?
Yeah, so I, a few years ago now, when I started sort of thinking about this area and search listening, wrote an ebook called Consumer Insight in the Age of Google. And until I think the 13th of May, you can get that for 50% off. It's usually $49, so it'll be $24 and a half dollars. You just need to go to that website or searchlistening.com and look in the academy and find the book, and use the code ATP webinar 2, and that's the word 2 rather than the number.
Yep, so I also wrote a book just before so
she did it first. Yeah.
Very different, well, not very different, slightly different topic. So right at the beginning I mentioned that we formed SEO strategies with public relations, and they were really successful from a sort of measurement and impact and how for businesses, but also just generally in PR as well. So this book goes through that from start to finish. Insight is just one of the chapters, but it goes through to sort of measurement as well. So it's a bit of an overview. So yeah, it's very lightly touches on what we've talked about today, but it sort of gives you that sort of step-by-step guide of how to do SEO PR. And it's free, that's the point. Yeah. It's normally $24. There are a limited amount. Just if you get to that site and you need to, I think it should automatically be free, but just in case it asks you for a code, it's Lockdown Learning.
Lovely. Okay, that's great. Thanks so much for yeah, those offers today. That's brilliant. So mentioned this at the beginning of the webinar, but these are running every month now. They are on the last Wednesday of the month, so put it in your diary. We'll be on at 4:30, which is London time. So that's British summertime. And invites to the next one will be going out soon, so please subscribe to that. It's going to be about how search listening can help manage your reputation online. Again, there were some questions coming up about that. That we didn't get around to because we'd have to go into lots and lots of detail. So yeah, join next month's webinar for that one. Check out our YouTube channel for other webinars and helpful videos. And we've also got a page now live on the website. So that's answerthepublic.com/pages/webinars, where you can get all the info about previous and upcoming sessions. Yeah, we're sending out the recording tomorrow if you want to watch again. And we would love your feedback, so please do get in touch either on Twitter. You can @AnswerThePublic, or you can @me, I'm Hannah M. Foster, or you can email me, hannah@answerthepublic.com. So yeah, a huge thank you again, Stella and Sophie, for being here today. That was absolutely awesome. And yeah, I'm sure, well, we've had loads of feedback already, so it's really great. Thank you.
Brilliant.
And yeah, massive thank you for everyone that's tuned in today for sparing your time to come to this session. Hope to see you all next month. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.